Greetings in the Lord. Welcome to our continuing series on the spiritual journey. We're coming to you this evening from Vasey Auditorium at Villanova University. And the subject that we will be dealing with this evening is holistic spirituality. How body, mind, and spirit work together to lead us to wholeness. Later on, there will be an opportunity for all of you out there to ask some questions, and hopefully this will be a real opportunity for all of us to interchange our opinions. And we will be back with you in just a moment.
From the Vatican to St. Hubert's, from Saudi Arabia to Mayfair, the Catholic Standard and Times, the official newspaper of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, brings the world into your home each week. The Standard provides a Catholic overview of events around the globe and in your neighborhood. For just 36 cents an issue, you can keep your family informed from a Catholic perspective, formed in its faith and inspired by the lives of others. The Catholic Standard and Times, serving more than 1 million Catholics in the Delaware Valley, make it your favorite newspaper.
We begin our presentation on holistic spirituality, interestingly enough, with the word holiness, that probably has a lot of emotional baggage associated with it. People might tend to think that it has to do with piety and prayer and church, etc. However, the original derivation of that word holiness came from the Greek word holos, that meant whole. So the church's most ancient understanding of holiness meant that it had to do with wholeness. So when we say that holiness is wholeness, we're not just saying something that sounds cute and something that looks good on a liturgical banner. We're talking about the church's most ancient understanding of what it means to be fully human and fully alive. But what does it mean then to be whole? Well, there are various levels of growth that we all need to go through. Usually we refer to three: the physical, and the mental, and the spiritual. Holistic spirituality believes that a person cannot really be whole until and unless they are integrated on all three of these levels. Now, why do we say that? Because the very best thinking today seems to indicate that what happens on one level of a person has ramifications on the other two levels. For example, it no longer makes any sense to say that, well, that's just an emotional problem I have. And of course, it doesn't enter all into my physical health. That's crazy. We know that everything has an effect on everything else. For example, taking a look at how the mental affects the physical. We get into the whole idea of psychosomatic ailments. When people hear that term, they tend to think, oh, that means it's all just in your mind, right? No, that's not the case at all. A psychosomatic ailment is very real. The thing is, however, it has been caused by some kind of an emotional or spiritual difficulty in our lives. Now, how common is that? Doctors are telling us that perhaps as much as 80% of all of our ailments are psychosomatic in nature, which means that we are literally doing it to ourselves. 4 times out of 5 when we get ill, it's because of some kind of an imbalance deep inside ourselves. How about the spiritual affecting the physical? There we get into the whole idea of healing. When a person has, as Abraham Maslow refers to it, a religious peak experience, when they come together on the deepest level of who they are, you tend to have a reaction on the physical level. So what we're saying here is that all three of these things are absolutely necessary for our wholeness and our growth as individuals. And furthermore, we're saying that any kind of a spirituality that is worth its salt as we move into the 21st century is going to have to be a spirituality that takes seriously the total human person. If we only focus on the spiritual, then what that does is effectively disenfranchise all normal people who also care about their physical health and their mental well-being. All three need to go together to produce a person who is fully human and fully alive. What I'd like to do tonight is to take a look at each of those three areas, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, and to see what we might be able to say about those three areas. The development of our physical health takes place when we work on three different things: nutrition, exercise, and rest. Let's take them one at a time. First of all, nutrition. The diet of the typical American is pretty much of a disaster. We consume about 40 to 45% fat in our diet. We consume incredibly high amounts of sugar in our diet. We consume incredibly high amounts of additives and preservatives. Now, once again, common sense would have us think, well, so what? What does this have to do with spirituality? It has a lot to do with it. Sometimes when people come to me with a spiritual problem, one of the first things that I'll have them do is do a dietary assessment. And if there are some imbalances in their life in that regard, I ask them to change their diet for a couple weeks. Perhaps they feel that God doesn't love them, and I talk to them about changing their diet. And of course they think that's crazy. They say, what does that have to do with my spiritual problem? Well, they change their diet, and they come back 2 weeks later, and guess what? God loves them. So it appeared to be a spiritual problem. In reality, however, it was caused by a nutritional imbalance. We know that there are certain foods that lead to depression, certain things that set people off emotionally. We know that additives and preservatives and colors and dyes affect our own physical mannerisms. Look what this has done with youngsters in school today with the Feingold diet. We found out that youngsters have been able to change their diet, and as a result of that, have changed their behavior. Now, for ourselves as adults, perhaps we don't jump around in a classroom the way little children do, but we react in our own way. We react with anxiety. Everybody's uptight. It seems like half the people you talk to are either seeing a counselor or on some kind of antidepressants or some kind of pills that are helping them to cope every day. So nutrition is really, really important. Exercise is also key. Apparently we need about only 20 to 25 minutes of exercise 3 times a week for the maximum functioning of the human body. It doesn't sound like much, but how many of us are really getting it? The excuse that we often use is, I don't have time. But of course, if it was really important to us, we would find time. And exercise, what does this have to do with spirituality? We found out that people who exercise, who run, have a decrease in depression. They tend to feel better about themselves. So everything works together to produce wholeness. So we're going to continue on with the rest of this picture when we come back after this short message.
What can you do about AIDS?
The next thing we want to take a look at is the role of rest. You can cheat a little bit with nutrition, which most of us do, and also with exercise, but you can't cheat for very long when it comes to rest before it begins to really start manifesting in our lives. Apparently, we know for sure that we need about 6 hours of sleep each night. Now, some people need more. But we know for sure that you need at least 6 hours because it takes that long for us to work through the dream cycle. And we found out that people who are not allowed to dream will quickly begin to start manifesting psychotic symptoms. That's how important it is for us to be able to dream totally. So nutrition, exercise, and rest make up the physical side of holistic health. Now the mental side is made up of 3 other things. Imagination, that here I'm going to be referring to primarily in terms of positive thinking. Also, visualization, seeing with our mind's eye the way we would like to see a thing turn out. And also, belief, a strong belief in oneself and in the goodness of life. This is what makes up the mental triad. First of all, positive thinking. The dirtiest 4-letter word in the English language is can't. I can't do this, I can't do that. When we get into that kind of negative thinking, we shortchange ourselves. We know that even the geniuses among us, the Albert Einsteins, are using maybe 10 or 15% of their brain power. And so when it comes to our youngsters, we need to let them know that God only knows what limits they can attain. So it's important for us to begin to start thinking positively. And it's also important for us to associate with positive thinking people. When you hang around with negative people, they can really tear you down. You can really feel the energy just going out of you when you're around people who do nothing but complain all the time. And so to avoid mental pollution, it's important to associate with people who are sending out positive vibrations as much as possible. When it comes then to how we look upon any situation, rather than looking at the negatives involved, it's important for us to start thinking of the positives and the potentials that may be there. And so rather than saying you can't do something, begin by thinking you can. Rather than saying you're nervous, say you're experiencing creative energy. Rather than saying you forgot, say it slipped my mind. Rather than saying you're under a lot of stress, say you're being challenged. Rather than saying you're worried, say you're concerned. Rather than saying you're broke, say you're temporarily out of cash flow. Rather than always looking upon the negative side of things, begin to start looking for the positive. Rather than saying, don't forget, say, please remember. Rather than saying, I'm sorry, say, I apologize. Turn everything around and create your own world by thinking positively. It's the old story, is the glass half empty or half full? It depends totally on your point of view. If we begin to change the negative programming, those negative tapes that are in our minds, we can begin to make our mind start working for us rather than being our greatest enemy. Visualization happens when we visualize the way we would like to see something turn out and then allowing the mind to work that out in reality. They've had some stupendous results with that down at the Symington Clinic with youngsters who have leukemia. These youngsters were told that if they use their minds properly, they can fight that leukemia. And I've seen some of the drawings that these kids have done. They have these knights in shining armor that are going out doing battle with these negative cancer cells in their body. And they've had stupendous results, at least remissions, apparent total cures, with these youngsters. Now, would that work with us if we began to use our mind that way? Theoretically, yes. But practically speaking, we would probably tell ourselves, this is crazy, this isn't going to work, this is stupid, and so it wouldn't work. But if we began to start using our mind as our ally, decide what you want in life. A lot of times people think they know, but if you really pin them down and say, tell me, what do you want? They don't know. But be clear about what you want. Create the mental picture of the way you would like to see things unfold in your life, and then the subconscious mind will infallibly begin to work things out according to the way you would like them to be. Belief is something that I'm here defining in terms of a good, healthy philosophy of life. A lot of people always look upon the negatives, and these, of course, are the people who die real young. But the people who think positively, these are the ones who live a long and a healthy life. Now, obviously, we're all going to die at one time because there's a limited warranty on this body. But if you tend to think positively, you're going to tend to be a healthy person. And then the final thing we want to take a look at is the spiritual dimension of ourself. And here we're talking about tolerance. We're talking about love and belief in a higher power. There are many different energies inside ourselves, but the strongest, the most humanizing, and the most spiritualizing of all those energies is love. When we're involved in love, we're the closest to God. Tolerance is really important. God loves diversity. It's only we who, in our own insecurity, want everybody to act like us and think like us. But if we not just tolerate diversity, but positively celebrate it in other people and ourselves, we're going to tend to have a good, positive outlook towards other people and towards life. And then, of course, there's that belief in the higher power that we keep coming back to. When you believe that life is not a coincidence, that there is a plan to things, and if there is a plan, there must be a planner. If you believe that there is some force that is leading the universe somewhere, then you're going to have that most precious of all things in your life, and that is meaning. And when you have a why, W-H-Y in life, you can put up with any kind of a what. So body, mind, and spirit, all three things are necessary to work together to producing a healthy individual. And when we come back, we're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers. See you shortly.
You've learned a lot in your life. Share the experience of a lifetime.
And now an opportunity for questions and answers. Jane.
Hi, Father Tom.
Hi, Jane.
When you were discussing the mental triad, okay, and in visualizing positively, is there a difference between doing that and just plain fantasizing? And is there a danger in getting involved in like a Walter Mitty kind of? And how can you tell the difference?
Good question. I think, once again, you always have to ask yourself, who's doing the talking and who's doing the wishing? Is it the ego or is it the true self? The ego always wants the Walter Mitty type things. The ego wants to be a millionaire and to win the lottery and to visualize something like that. The ego wants to be a big shot and have other people fall down at his or her feet. The ego wants endless pleasure. Those kind of needs are insatiable. And to give in to those kind of things would probably be more on the lines of daydreaming or just wishful thinking or fantasizing rather than positive visualization. When we're talking about here with visualization, we're talking about something that comes from the true self, something that has to do with authentic growth for the world. And we're part of the world, so it could be authentic growth for us or for loved ones. Probably, if you're looking for something that would be an easy way to distinguish it, you might say, does what I want to do come from love or from manipulation or something else? If it genuinely comes from love, a desire to love yourself, to love other people, and to make this a better world in which to live, by all means, use the powers of the mind for visualization. But if it has to do with the little self, as I like to call it, the ego, those little petty needs that really won't benefit anybody but ourselves, and really in the long run won't even benefit us, those kind of things really shouldn't be indulged in. Good question. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Father.
Hi.
You mentioned that one of the three things in spiritual holistic health was belief in a higher power.
Right.
What about a person who lives a Christian life in every way? He's loving, generous, caring, but can't find himself believing in a God or embracing an organized religion. Is he still healthy if he lives that Christian lifestyle and roundaboutly behaves in a Christian way?
Okay, there's a big difference between religion and spirituality. Religion has to do with the rites and rituals, the dogmas, the doctrines, and the moral codes of the great religions of the world. However, it is possible for a person to be religious, very religious, and yet not be spiritual. And the flip side of that is also true. It is possible for a person to be very spiritual, but yet not feel real comfortable in one of the organized religions of the world. So if that person is living spiritual values, lives love, believes in a higher power, believes in the big picture, then that person might be what theologian Karl Rahner calls an anonymous Christian. That person might not label themselves that. That person perhaps may never have even put his or her foot in church. But yet, in the eyes of God, what really matters in the final analysis is not what we do on a Sunday morning, but what we do all week long. In the eyes of God, it's not a matter so much of what religion we happen to belong to as much as what's in our heart. Now, obviously, the religions of the world are designed to be supportive of a person's inner spiritual journey. But yet people approach the religions of the world based on their own history. And they may have had some bad experiences when they were growing up. They may have not been able to relate to some of the things that are going on here and now. And so maybe for a period in their life they feel a certain amount of alienation and estrangement from religion. In a case like that, you would hope that they would eventually be able to arrive at some kind of reconciliation based on forgiveness to that religious heritage. But in the meantime, the most crucial thing is that they be living according to their highest spiritual values. Thanks.
Father,
Yes.
You've had a question about the mind and the spirit, and I've got one about the body. This nation seems to be in the throes of a health fad, a very strong health consciousness. People are buying exercise equipment, belong to Nautilus clubs. And I wonder if many of them are sacrificing another aspect of the triangle, if you will, for the sake of one. Could you comment on that?
I think that's very true. When you talk about holistic health to most people, they will usually only be willing to dialogue about the physical and the mental. And as far as I'm concerned, you can't separate the third part of that triad, and that is the spiritual. Now, if you try to idolize one aspect of life to the detriment of the other two, then what happens is that it really does become a false idol for you. I think we saw, interestingly enough, when the great running guru in the country, Jim Fixx, died at a fairly young age, and even right here in the Philadelphia area, when Jack Kelly died, who was in absolutely fantastic shape, we saw a reminder there to all of us that the body is limited. It's important to work on the body, and Obviously, from what I've said, I'm a firm believer in that. But the body isn't God. The body is like a suit of clothes that you wear around for a while, that one day you're going to have to surrender back to the earth. And your point is well taken. If a person makes too much out of that aspect and in the process perhaps ignores the mind and ignores the spirit, then all that good energy that's directed towards the body can in reality boomerang and backfire and become counterproductive. So I think that holistic health demands that we strike a certain balance and learn to integrate body, mind, and spirit. All three are necessary for the development of a person who is fully human and fully alive. We'd like to thank everybody who was here tonight. I think this was a really stimulating kind of a discussion because all of us are struggling in this regard and we all have our imbalances in one area or the other. When we come together in future shows, we're going to be talking about all the different twists and turns of the spiritual path. We're not going to let any stone unturned. And if you have enjoyed what we have done here tonight, perhaps you'd like to drop us a line. Our address is Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103. You've been a very cooperative audience and you've asked some super questions, and I thank all of you, and I thank all of you who are watching. Good night, everyone.